Imagine with me for a moment that you are towards the end of your retirement. You've been at the same career for almost 25 years, getting a steady paycheck every single month, knowing where your money is coming in and going out. And you decide one day to look at your 401k and you realize that just 7 years after the day that you retire, your money is actually going to run out. And on today's episode of the Rainmaker Family Show, we interviewed Tresa Todd, who had that realization at 50 years old, close to her retirement.
All right, we got a gem on the show today. Tresa Todd, welcome to the show.
Well, I am honored to be here. So good to see both of you.
I remember the first time we got to hang out, it was at Reba McEntire's old mansion.
That's
Remember this?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were both in, Pedro Adeo's world. Our podcast listeners would probably know that name. And he rented this mansion. I don't know if he found it on Airbnb or something, but we found out Reba McEntire used to live there, and it was pretty epic. And we had a mini mastermind there, and that was the first time, honestly, we met. And then we kind of ran in concentric circles around each other.
We sure did.
For a handful of years. And I feel like you serve a lot of the same audience that we serve. So I think this podcast is going to be so valuable because you've worked with thousands of women who are entrepreneurial driven, want to make a change for their family.
Yeah.
So Tresa, I want to start with like a little bit of your story because your story is really powerful. I think it's going to be really powerful for our audience here because you pivoted like crazy at age, I think I read 50. Age 50. So what was like the moment that you like drew the line in the sand? You're like, things got to change.
Well, before you answer that, Joe, I just say you do not look older than 50 at all. You look stunning. So our audience just needs to know that if you're not watching
go
on YouTube.
Watch on YouTube and you guys can see.
You're
It's true.
sweet. Well, I had been in the medical field for 25 years and thought that's where I would, eventually retire and that was it. But as you know, my 3 sons had become real estate investors in Dallas. I was a couple hours away in East Texas, and they had just found wild success. And they kept trying to talk me into, Mom, come to Dallas and we'll teach you. And you just don't really think about changing careers at 50 years old and like, oh my gosh, can I do it? And you have all these preconceived ideas about investing in real estate and no experience. And so it took them 3 years to talk me into it. And it was really when Kelton, my youngest son, showed me the numbers. He had come down, looked at my finances. And I think this is something that, especially as women, I don't think we do that very often. I thought I was just doing all the things right. I had worked. I had a 401k. I had a little bit of money in savings and retirement. And so you just think the American way and you're going to be okay. And he really came down, looked at my numbers. How much do you owe on your mortgage? How much do you have? And he said, Mom, you're going to live about 7 years after you retire. If you just keep living the same way, which was not extravagant at all, you're going to be out of money in 7 years.
Wow.
And that was the wake up call for me. I was like, oh my gosh. Cause you dream of traveling and, hanging out with your grandkids and all the things. And so that was it. That when he showed me those numbers, I was like, okay, I've got to consider this. And so I moved to Dallas and began investing in real estate. And it was such a game changer. I was making $65,000 a year at the end of a 25-year career. And I made $20,000 on my very first real estate deal.
Wow.
I mean, within a month after starting, and I was like, oh my gosh. And went on to make more money in the next few months than I had in my 401k after 25 years.
Wow.
And so I was like, I wanted to scream it from the rooftops because it's it's very much a man's world. I was going to all the networking events and it was men. And I love men. I mean, I have 3 sons, but I was like, women need to know that they can do this. And so again, my sons heard me whining, where are all the women? And they said, well, why don't you start something for women? And I said, oh, I will someday. And they said, well, just put a date on the calendar. And boy, if I could tell you anything, that is just the greatest thing they could have said to me because I did just that. I picked a date that was 3 months out. That seemed like a long time out.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, on this day, I am going to start. And that opened up a whole new world for me that I would have never. I didn't even know if women wanted to invest in real estate. I didn't know if any women would show up, but exactly 40 women showed up that very first night on August the 28th. And I mean, the history is now we're the largest women's real estate investors network in the nation. Who would have known? I mean, I just never, ever expected anything like that, but it has been the most amazing adventure. And I'm so grateful.
That's so cool. What did that, like when you walked into that room with those other 40 women, like what were some of the things that you talked about or shared? What was your feeling going into that? Because at first I know you're like,
Fear was the only thing going through my mind. The first thing is I only had 14 months experience myself. I don't know what I was thinking. And I was so afraid they were going to ask me questions and I didn't know the answer. And you know what they did? But you just find them when somebody out, like, well, I don't know, but let's find out together. But I was so afraid but so grateful that I did it. And just to see, all I had to know was a little bit more than they did. And it was enough to get them excited and to show them what was possible. And they wanted to learn. They were so eager. They were so excited. And so we just kept meeting. And I kept, learning and growing and able to bring more value every single time I showed up. And they kept bringing their friends. And it's been the most, but yeah, I had a lot of fear, a lot of unworthiness. Who am I to think I could do this? But so grateful that I stepped out in faith. I made that leap of faith, and it has been the most incredible adventure I've ever been on.
That's so good. Tresa, I'd love for you to just touch on a little bit about like that unworthiness piece. Cause I think men and women, but I think specifically women feel that at different points in their life, whether that's when they become a mother and they are just like, oh my gosh, what is this? Or when they, start a new career, or maybe they step into more of a job that has more men, or they're not as experienced, or having almost like these big dreams of, man, I know that I was created for more. I know I'm ambitious and driven, but feeling that unworthiness at different points of your life. What are some ways that you've really helped maybe even some of your students or yourself like overcome that belief?
Yeah. Here's the deal. Most people stay in the same economic level that they were raised in. That's who all of our friends are. That's who we hang out with. It's what we know. It's what we're comfortable with. And so most of us never even imagine that we would, go way past that. I think everybody hopes it. Everybody wants it. But no, I think it's very few people, very rare that you really start believing it. And that's what I had to do. I really had to work on my mindset and say, listen, this is what I believe now. Anyone that is willing to put in the work is worthy of it. Anyone that is willing, we have two choices. We can stay in our fear. We can stay small and never try, never take any risk, never launch. And sometimes that feels safer. And I know for me as a mom raising kids, when you had I had a steady paycheck coming in. I knew exactly how much I was going to be making every single month. And somehow or another, that made me feel safe. Even though it was a small check, I at least knew. Well, when you're launching out to be an entrepreneur, you don't know when that next paycheck is going to be. You don't know how much it's going to be. So it's this huge leap of faith, but it's the only thing that will eventually set you free. You just have to do it. And so that's what I love I have to remind myself constantly, but I also love to just hopefully challenge and inspire all of my students and my ladies. Listen, it's worth it. Your life will always stay the same if we are never willing to think bigger and to take whatever action is necessary. I know that you are teaching women a way that they can transform their lives. And as they hear you and as you teach them, they all have a choice to make. Every single one of them have a choice to make of saying, oh, well, this sounds exciting. This sounds fun. Maybe it would work for me. Or I could just stay safe in my little spot. But you will never know what lays on the other side when you take that leap.
That's so powerful.
That's so good.
What would you say, like, now you've worked with thousands of women, taking this leap of faith, what would you say is one of the biggest like mindset hurdles you have to get over with people?
Whoo, I think it's two things, and I think we've already mentioned it, but we'll talk more into it. I think one is fear and worthiness. Thinking, who am I to have money? Why would, a lot of, a lot of women, why would God allow me to be wealthy? What is so special about me? I think that we tend to think that wealth is just for an elect few that were born with the silver spoon in their hand. But it's for anyone, again, who's willing to do the hard things. I mean, I look at the two of you, and you were willing to do, and you didn't, you weren't successful overnight. It takes time and doing things and trying again. And so being determined that you are going to change your life. And listen, ladies, if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your family. You be the one that breaks that generational of barely enough or not enough off of your family, and chase those dreams and show your kids what's possible. Because I just said most people stay in the economic level that they grow up in. And if you're not the one that changes it, it's likely that your kids are not going to change it either. And they're going to stay right there. That reminds me, I hope I can share a little story.
Yes, please do.
Have you heard the story about the fleas? This is true scientific story, but fleas have the ability to jump about 8 inches, which is unbelievable when you think about how tiny a flea is. Well, some scientists put fleas in a little mason jar, and of course they would just pop right out. Well, they put a lid on it, poked some holes in it. Within 3 days, those fleas learned not to jump that high. They would just jump so that they wouldn't hit that lid, which is about 3-4 inches. 3 days later, they took that lid off. And do you know those fleas never jumped out again? They now thought they could only jump that 3 to 4 inches, but they had the potential. They had the ability. They had even done it before. And what's even crazier is all their offspring never jumped any higher than that.
Wow.
And so if we take that story to heart, we're limiting ourselves. We have so much potential. There's so much we can do. And that is heartbreaking because we're worthy of so much more, but it's even more heartbreaking when we think that we're putting these limits on our kids. And it's worth it. So I just always want to inspire women. Listen, be willing. If you won't do it for yourself, look your kids in the eyes and say, hey, I'm going to take this risk and I'm going to do it for you. I want to show you what is possible. I don't want you to live in these boundaries that we've had from generation and generation and generation.
What's up, Rainmaker? If you're like me, having a good night's sleep is an absolute must, especially as a parent and an entrepreneur. And I feel like I found the secret weapon. It's called 8 Sleep. This brand is a way to add heating and cooling to any bed. And I'm telling you, this cooling feature is an absolute life changer for me, especially during those warm summer months. This might be TMI, but I sweat very easily. And I didn't really realize how much this was affecting my quality of sleep. Once I slept on this bed that has a cooling feature, imagine like the cool side of the pillow, but like all over your body all the time. I do not know how I lived without this. So if you're ready to revolutionize your sleep, head over to rainmakerfamily.com/deals. We got a hookup for Rainmaker Family Show listeners. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/deals and check out 8 Sleep. All right, back to the show.
That's so good. Yeah. Teaching them and showing by example, it's one thing to say something, but it's another thing to go out and do it. And they're watching you and they're seeing how you take risk or commit to going through some kind of physical transformation or health transformation or studying or learning something new. They're seeing that transformation and what is possible too.
Absolutely.
I love that.
I feel like real estate is for some reason scarier for people. Like, what do you think it is about real estate? And is it the big numbers? And I don't know, do you have any stories of, maybe women that came in, maybe it's that first group or the first season that had that fear of like, oh my gosh, investing in real estate? Like, tell us a little bit about that. Like,
I think that the number one myth about real estate is that you have to have a lot of money to get started.
Yeah, so break that down. I think that's interesting because I think some listeners right now are like, wait, I thought you did need to have a lot of money.
Yeah, because houses are expensive, right? I mean, properties are expensive. And so you would just assume that you have to have a lot of money. But we do this, and the way that we teach is we always use other people's money And I mean, it doesn't matter if you're acquiring rentals, if you're flipping, wholesaling, no matter what, there is a way to use other people's money. There are people out there that understand that when they lend you money in real estate, they are going to make an amazing ROI, and they're lined up to lend that money to someone who is educated and understands and has the specialized knowledge. So that was the very first thing even I had to get past is, I remember my sons, when they were teaching me, they were like, oh, just get it under contract. And I'm like, you're scared to death to get it under contract when you're like, I don't have any money in my bank to cover this. And they're like, trust me, we're going to use other people's money. And we did. And so that's exactly what I'm teaching my women. And, in my network, I have women who want to lend and then women who need to borrow. And so we've created an amazing, a place where it's a one-stop shop. So that was the number one thing. And then I think women are afraid of like legal implications and, and can I do it? Can I do it? And I think it seems harder than it is. And really, when you break it down, if you get specialized knowledge, I mean, once you know it, and you can't unknow it. It's really not rocket science. And so that's once they go through a master class and they begin to hear it, and they're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I understand how you can use other people's money. I understand you only need to know these few things. We show them how to find off-market deals. So we're not competing when everybody's talking about, houses going for over asking. Those aren't the properties that we're buying as investors. We're buying ugly houses that need some work and hoarder houses and people that are, we create win-wins with people that are facing foreclosures, going through some hard times, and we're able to put cash in their pocket, not our cash, but using somebody else's cash, putting cash in their pocket and creating win-wins for people. And that's what it's all about.
That's huge. I think that's a breakthrough. I think when, I don't know, just growing up, I never heard that narrative. Oh,
definitely not.
It was like, oh no, you want to buy a house, you better save up for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we started meeting people who was like, real estate investors and, being in masterminds and, oh, I run a fund. I run a fund. I'm like, wait, what? You're buying all these assets and with none of your own money. Like it's just there. I think that's a belief that we just want to break up everybody is that there's tons of money out there that you can access. And I think one of the things we try to really hammer into the mindset is resourcefulness, right? Over resources, right? Like you're never limited by your resources. You're only limited by your resourcefulness. And so
that's right.
I love hearing that because I think it's good for people to hear. If you grew up with that narrative of you need to actually have the money to do this thing, there's ways to partner with other people that have the money who don't want to do the work, right? Like they don't want to be the one on the ground finding those deals.
That's right.
And you really get paid to be the middle person. That's kind of what we do on Amazon as well. We get paid to really, connect dots.
Absolutely.
And it's a great way to get started. Eventually, sure, you can do your own deals with your own money, but it's honestly, I feel like once you get this system rolling, it's probably, you have way more leverage using other people's money because even if you're putting your own money in a deal, you can do bigger deals.
You only have so much money. You only have
Exactly.
so much money. I don't care how much money you have. You only have so much of it. And so even though now I do both sides of it. I lend my money to somebody else, but I use somebody else's money for my own deals.
Yeah.
And until you really understand how that works, so this is what I would say, whether it's wanting to learn how to make money with Amazon or real estate or anything else, get yourself in the right room, lean into it. Don't just be afraid and believe all the myths that I can't do it. Get yourself the training, get yourself in the room so that you can learn about it, have an open mind. My favorite thing to do is to teach women that were right where I was, that was making somewhere between $65,000 and $100,000. And they think that's all they'll make the rest of their life. Those are my favorite ladies to reach out, because I'm like, I know how it transformed my life, never believing that it was possible. So when I see another woman in the medical field or a teacher or something, in that same range, I'm like, oh girl, let me just show you what is possible for you.
That's so good. Can you share an example of maybe a real estate deal that you've done in the past that has taught you just an important lesson, whether it was like a huge success and like, oh man, I'm going to recreate that again, or maybe it felt like a failure at the time?
Yeah, well, I've definitely had a lot of both.
Yes.
I think about the very first deal where I made that $20,000,
Mhm.
and that is always what I'm most excited about is when I see one of my students get their very first deal, I know that their life will never be the same again because
Mhm.
2 things happened. First of all, they now believe it's possible. They have
Mm.
done it. That's what happened to me. And then second of all, they know they can do it. And once they know they
Mhm.
can do it, all you just think, "Well, I just gotta go do it again and again and
Yeah.
again and again." So, that's the most exciting. But you also do have to have some expectation that everything is not going to go as smoothly. Some deals fall through. Now, the thing is you want the right training, is that a deal can fall through and you still don't necessarily lose any money on it.
Mhm.
And so that because you wanna feel good about that, I think that's another reason that hold people back. But if you
Yeah.
have the right training and you do everything the right way, a deal can fall through, but you didn't really lose any money on the deal. But yeah, we teach how to deal with contractors. That's probably the most difficult thing about this business
Yeah.
if you're flipping, is
Yeah.
dealing with contractors, and that is where most people tend to lose money. However, we teach our students a specific way to deal with contractors. We only pay them for the work that they have done. We never
Mhm.
pay them in advance. And that is just a deal that's a game changer because the horror stories that we hear, you
Yeah.
hand you hand a contractor $30,000 and you never see him again, or
Yeah.
they come and do 3 days worth of work and then you never see him again, or they do horrible
Mhm.
work.
Yeah.
So, again, I think it is having the right specialized knowledge and the right training. I mean, that's why you do what you do, is you teach women how to do what they're doing, but you teach them how to do it the right way, how to mitigate the risk and,
Yeah.
and make the most profits. So,
Mhm.
having a mentor and a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish
Absolutely.
we had your contractor training because we built it back here in the house we just moved away from. Actually, it took us 4 years to build this ADU in the back.
From the time of
Oh,
deciding we're going to
Four
like getting
years. Oh
permits
my
what
and
a
goodness. We
oh
learned
my
so
gosh.
much through just failing about how to
Yeah.
manage contractors. And I could just
Yes.
imagine you can't do a deal it's going to take you 4 years
4
to do
years
some
to
work,
do it. That's
right?
right. That's
That's
right.
crazy. So yeah, we need to get your SOPs on that,
Well,
I think.
absolutely. I would be glad to share that with you.
Yeah, we learned a lot the hard way. Accountability, deadlines.
yeah.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
Yes.
interesting to see
Yeah.
too the evolution of our business and that
Yeah.
time frame too, because we learned so much as being like
Oh yeah,
leaders
leading a
and
team.
leadership and collaboration and all of that. So yeah, but I know like Teresa, you built like such an incredible community of women supporting one another, which is what we're all about. And like, or I should say, what have you learned about like leadership and collaboration along the way, like in your own business or even with the women that you're teaching and some of those things like, hey, like we're all in this together. Let's
Yeah.
help one another win.
Yes, the community that you build is probably the most precious thing about what we do. I
Mm,
absolutely love the ladies, and I think as leadership, we kind of set the example of what kind of community that you're going to have. So from
mhm,
day one, I'm talking about we want to build something positive. There's enough hate and yuck and all of that out there in the world. Let's not bring it in here. Let's keep it positive. Let's encourage and inspire. There's no room for jealousy. And I think you have to say those things over and over and over. They have to see an example of grace and goodness and all the things, and it has been incredible to see the kind of community that we have built and how positive and encouraging they are. Because, you hear the horror stories of, how, and a community can fall apart. You get the wrong people in there and it can fall apart so quickly if you, as a leader, do not. And I mean, I've had to literally learn that the hard way. Also, going in and being humble enough to admit
mhm,
when you've made a mistake and change, hey, this is what I said, but this is no longer serving us, and we've got to change this. And of course, you're going to have some people angry at you. But at the same time, things change and life changes, and we have to be willing to pivot and be humble enough and courageous enough to go in and look all of your community in the face and say, okay, I failed at this, and we're going to, so that's been very eye-opening, and so grateful for a community that has showed so much grace when necessary.
mhm. Yeah. You talked a little bit in your answer about pivoting, and I know like in your career, you did make a pivot, and I'm sure you're training women who are also feeling that nudge of like, oh, I need to pivot and to do something differently. How have you learned to pivot as gracefully as you can, even with like, say, the market changes since you've been doing it,
Oh,
or
yeah.
maybe there's been
Interest
like,
rates.
yes,
Oh my gosh.
interest
Yeah.
rates or rules and regulations, specifically in your world that maybe Steve and I don't know about. How have you learned to take a pivot coming or a change with grace?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think, first of all, the very first pivot obviously was walking away from that
Mhm,
comfortable paycheck at 50 years old to become an entrepreneur. That was the very first pivot and be willing to learn something new. And
mhm,
then the next pivot was obviously starting the Women's Real Estate Investors
yeah,
Network, but it was a live event. I mean, we were getting together with, and then that next huge pivot was when 2020 hit.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
we
mhm,
had hotels booked, we were ready to go to the next,
wow,
and all of that came to a, screeching halt. But you mentioned Pedro, and you were there too. I'd
Yeah.
never heard of the challenge, and we were there in January, and the world shuts down,
mhm,
in February, and that's where I learned how to do the masterclass, the challenge, and
Yeah.
so we had to pivot. Now we're gonna go online, and
mhm,
at that time, it was the scariest thing in the world, but that's really what launched us into nationwide. We would have been stuck probably forever just being right here in Texas and
Yeah.
never
mhm,
even thinking about launching out. And so and then, like you said, even in real estate, so those are the first big things that taught me that you better be willing to pivot because things can change overnight. So whether it's
mhm,
interest rates, obviously things were crazy and well, most investors just quit investing in 2020. And
wow,
Yeah.
we just kept going and we did some of our biggest and best, most lucrative deals in 2020.
Wow.
And then 2021, now everything's going over asking. And people are like,
mhm,
oh, you can't do real estate now. I'm like, we just kept doing it because we were
Yeah.
buying off market properties.
Yeah.
And now it's the interest rates. But if we just don't let all of the noise get in.
mhm,
You gotta shut the noise out and you gotta pay attention and you have to be able to zig and zag and
mhm,
stay in the know. Have a mentor and we have them. We have tons of them who are saying, okay, well, this doesn't work anymore, but we can do it this way, or let's do it that
mhm.
way. And that's what's kept us going is having the right people in our life that lead us so that we can therefore lead our community.
That's so good. That sounds a lot like a
Yeah.
lot like Amazon, but a lot like any business too. I
Yeah.
think, thankfully we're in amazing masterminds with businesses across all different industries. And so you learn about, the longer you're in business, the more pivots and change and, oh
Yes.
no, this regulation or, oh, we're not
Yep.
supposed to do it this way, or this changed just slightly on the platform that we're using, whether it's Shopify or Instagram. I mean, think
Oh
about
my
all
God.
all the influencers have had to change and pivot because of this algorithm change or whatever. And
Yes, ma'am.
it's all about learning to be like, okay, I'm not going to panic.
Yep.
I'm going to learn and I'm going to adapt. And like business is resilient. And I've got people around me to encourage me and the tools and just knowing like, don't jump ahead to like all the negative what ifs because it'll just cause this like unnecessary spiral in your head to distract you from actually putting in the effort and time right now into your
I
business and what it
agree.
needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chelsea, I think that you said it. So I think what sets you apart is that you didn't give up. When so many people, when something happens, they just panic and they're like, "Oh, it's impossible." Or, well, we have heard how many stories of, well, we had a business, it was going, and then this happened, and then
Mm,
instead of pivoting, instead of learning a different way, they just gave up. They just quit, and they've always used it as an excuse. And instead of figuring it out and going to people that know more than we know. I'm so grateful that there's people that have been doing these things longer than we have that we can always go to and say, "Okay, help." I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking about you. I mean, y'all are doing some things that we're trying to, say, "Hey, if it's working for them, let's see if it will work for us." And y'all have been so gracious to say, "Hey, here's how we're doing it." So,
Yeah.
and we're so grateful for that.
So powerful. The power of community and building
mhm,
business. It's huge
yeah.
and definitely a
Yeah.
huge part of our journey for sure.
Mhm.
How are you feeling about 2025? We're coming into a new year. What is your sense for
I
2025
am going
entrepreneurship?
into 2025 so excited. I literally just came back from a mastermind, and my motto is "Let's thrive in 2025." Um, I choose a word for the year every year, and my word is victory. There's a scripture that says that he surrounds us with songs of victory, and that's what I'm going into 2025 with, just expecting victory, declaring it over family and finances and business and all the things. Listen, it's unlimited. We are so blessed to be in America where, anything is possible. If you are willing to just do the things and put in the work and learn and take action, anything is possible if we're willing. I had to sit down and write out my new resolutions and
Yeah.
goals, and I love that. I love a fresh start. So the beginning of a year is always like my favorite time to figure out, what am I going to do different, health wise, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and of course, financially and business wise. What can I do to make this year better than it was last year? And so that's been pretty fun to start this year out.
That's amazing. I love that. Victory in 2025. That's so good.
Yes.
I have kind of one closing question because I know, Tresa, you work with your boys in your different businesses, and I know they're the ones that they kind of got you into investing, which I feel like is such a unique relationship. Not only to have like family that you're in business with, which I think some people would say like, don't do it, or I could never work with, but you guys have done this so beautifully and seamlessly. I'm just wondering how you guys have created such an awesome working relationship, or did you purposefully raise your boys to be with that, or did they just kind of figure it out along the way?
Oh, no, I always say I was the most unentrepreneurial person in the world. I had a job and I knew how to do that job. However, for whatever reason, I gave birth 3 sons that came out of the womb selling something and willing to do whatever it took. And so they were my very first mentors in my life, and they taught me real estate. But however, you did say seamlessly, and I will say it wasn't seamlessly because we all 3 or all of us, my oldest son has 6 kids.
Wow.
So he does real estate, but he's actually not in the Women's Real Estate Investors Network business with us. But the youngest 2, we all have so many opinions and so much personality. However, I am very thankful, and we share it, and we're loud. I mean, if our staff sometimes like, what is going on in that room? Because, we raise our voices but we never take it personal. When we walk out of the door, nobody's mad at each other. We can all go to dinner, family dinner afterwards, and it's over. We're just sharing, what we think will work, what we think won't work. And we get a little loud about it sometimes, but we've learned to, it's taken us a while to find where each one of us really thrive. What is my job? What is your job? And we try to stay in our own lane and honor one another and honor one another's decisions and opinions in their particular, what they are doing. And it's really worked out. And the last year has been the most peaceful year. It's gotten better because we've learned and so I think all families should go in business together.
Yeah.
I mean, as a mom, oh my gosh, it's such an honor to be in business with my sons. I'm so proud of them. I'm so thankful to them for, they've changed my life. And I love to see other families in business. It's just, it's a delight. It is hard, but I mean, y'all are a family. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
you gotta,
rainbows and butterflies over
that's
here.
exactly right. But it's all about being able to forgive and honor one another, I think.
Absolutely.
That's huge. Yeah, I know definitely some moms and families in our community we've seen this where it's like mommy daughter duo doing the business together, or kids getting involved. They're launching their own brands. Like, it's so cool to see. And what a cool way to grow as a family, because it kind of brings up all the stuff, right? Like, as you're growing, you're hitting walls and you're getting through things together. Like, really, you got to talk about the real stuff. And so
that's right.
That's one of the reasons we love it too. So if you're thinking about starting a business with your kids, do it.
That's right.
Don't listen to anyone that says don't do it. I love it. Tresa, where can our audience find you, follow you? Like, where's the best place to send them if they're interested in hearing more?
Well, you could check us out at Women's Rain. I love it. Y'all are the Rainmakers, and we
Yeah.
are the Women's Rain. And that's Women's REIN, and that stands for Women's Real Estate Investors Network. And then you could also anytime Google us at or check us out at withoutfearofherfuture.com. That's where we host all of our masterclass. So withoutfearofherfuture.com, and check out one of our masterclasses. We would love to see you on the inside.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tresa, for being on today's show. It was so fun to talk to you about your entrepreneurship journey, even investing all the way to being in business with your family. What a beautiful picture that is. So thank you for sharing so openly with our audience. It was just such a joy to connect and to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I bless y'all, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. If you're not a part of our mastermind yet, I want to say I think you're missing out. Our heart here at Rainmakers is to create total abundance for you. That's why we're offering a free one-on-one family freedom design session for you, our faithful listener.
Yeah, if you want to hop on a call with our team, see if it's a good fit to build a business that creates time freedom for you, financial abundance, and helps you leave that thriving family legacy. That's what we're all about in our mastermind. You can grab a time on our team's calendar at rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind.